Welcome, welcome, welcome. The Shepherd's Podcast. I'm your host, Jefferson.
And I'm Kenji.
Hey, today, guys, we got a great guest, a fellow brother, fellow shepherd, and all-around good dude, talented guy. He's a well-known comic writer, screenplay writer. You've known him for his really cool comics, graphic novels, vinyl, plastic, Thomas River, all these great brands. He's done stuff for Marvel, DC. I'll let him do a better job of walking you through his journey. But today we have Doug Wagner. Yo, buddy.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Thanks for including me.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Definitely. Thanks for joining. And yeah, we're going to give the listeners a really cool show and get to see the world of Doug Wagner, what it's like to be behind the scenes of, a popular graphic novel writer, screenwriter, and yeah, just what that journey's been like and where you're headed. So, yeah, give everybody a little intro on, how you got into this and where you come from, and yeah, how'd you get so zany, talented, cool?
I mean, well, that's a long story. I'm not sure we got time for all of it, but I'll try to make it as succinct as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, originally from Florida, grew up, kind of wrestling with alligators and snapping turtles and sharks and all that kind of stuff. Florida's a weird state, as everybody knows. I mean, Florida man is a term. Basically, I mean, when looking back on it, after you get into writing and stuff, you realize, like, I was always a writer. So even when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old, I used to write stories back then about stuff that I just come up with. And I think everybody at that age probably is, a daydreamer of a bit and creative. For me, it just never went away. It just became a thing. Kind of toyed with that a little bit all the way up until I was 17, where I met actually Kelly Hamner, who's a 40-year veteran in comics now. We went to high school together. We kind of started writing our own stories just for fun. And then about 6 months in it, because I'm a slow learner, I realized, like, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And, much to the chagrin of my parents, I'm not too happy about choosing to be a writer for a living, as you can imagine. Most parents find out they have a creative in the family don't. And then it was just like, I mean, after that, it just became an obsession. And so, a lot of writing, a lot of rejection. I'm constantly sending in stuff, constantly getting rejected. Worked, I struggled, obviously. I mean, at 17, you're not a good writer most of the time. So over the years, 20-plus different jobs, 4 different colleges, all trying to figure out a way not to be a writer, but it wouldn't leave me alone. And finally, probably in 2004, now I'd had some success of writing before that, just small things. But in 2004, I kind of decided, like, I'm tired of waiting for anybody to give me permission. And so with my friend Kevin Gardner, we started 12 Gauge Comics, and I just started writing comics full time. And the rest is kind of history. Then it's just, dude, I think the secret past that is keep your head down and keep writing. And that's kind of what's gotten me to this point.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the ones that you and Kevin did was The Ride, which is, a cult classic, right? Black and white cult classic that has been going on for years with some of the top writers and artists, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's the one that kicked it off. I mean, that was the one where Kevin and I are sitting at his house one night watching TV and, doing the typical thing everybody, I think, does, whether it's movies or TV where you're like, or comics, like, well, if I was in charge of DC or if I was in charge of Warner Brothers, I'd do this. And finally it got to the point where I can't remember which one of us said it, but one of us said, it's time to shut up, put up or shut up. Like, we keep talking and all the things we'd do if we were in charge. Well, let's prove it. And so we came up with The Ride and, just kind of a joint venture of like, hey, what if we did black and white? We knew back then that the most popular artists weren't going to sign on for more than, say, an issue. So we said, hey, how about like 10 to 11 page chapters, see where that takes us. And we got lucky. And then everybody, we just, the talent we signed past that point became, as you said, like a cult classic phenomenon.
I mean, kudos to you guys. And, obviously I know Kevin a little bit as well. And, for you guys to put your money where your mouth is, as you say, like you said, everyone sits back and goes, oh, that's garbage, I could do better, or I would have done it differently. And we've been talking with other creators, on this podcast that are coming up as well. And there's this ongoing theme that there's a thread of ambition that you have that moment and you either take it or you don't. And it sounds like you guys were just like, let's do it the way you're saying it.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's the key. I tell, and I was a professor for about 10 years too, and teaching creative writing and art as well. And the thing I always try to drive in is like, don't wait for somebody to give you permission. That's probably one of my biggest mistakes. As I kept waiting for a publisher or a movie company or somebody to go, hey, we now give you permission to do this. In today's world with the internet, you can start doing it today. Like, you don't have to wait. You don't need anybody's permission to write.
You got distribution platforms already, everywhere to like get it up there and out in the public, right?
Oh yeah, it's easy. I mean, it's easier than ever. Now of course that means there's going to be more critics than ever, but that's just part of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, some like it, some don't. I mean, that's just part of it. But yeah, so as you're going down the road of working your way up and getting more attention, and because obviously as a writer, and especially in the graphic novel comic world, getting attention is key, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, attention is key. Honestly, it's just about trying to create the best product you can, and then somehow getting people to see it. And that's always the hard rub. Is like, most creatives aren't good marketers.
Right.
So that's just a constant struggle.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure there's people that are going to listen to this and go, oh, I know him, or I know Kevin, or I know 12 Gauge, or obviously you did big stuff for Marvel, Blizzard, Warcraft, and all that kind of stuff. Arrow, and what is the common thread? Talk about a little bit of the struggle of the common thread of living the life of someone who's doing it, and you're doing it at a high level.
Yeah, man, it's the writer of the team is typically the manager of the team too. As far as the whole creative team behind a comic, and so everybody's looking to you for the answers. And to be honest, most of the time we don't have them. That's just the fact. And you're constantly struggling trying to not only figure out how to write a good story, but then how to get people to notice it. And, obviously I try to hire artists who stand out on the stands. And keep in mind, on a regular month, you're competing with 500 titles that are coming out the same time you're coming out. And that's including Marvel and DC and all the great Image books and Boom and Dark Horse, and every comic company you can imagine is putting out books that month. How do you get somebody to pick up yours out of 1 out of 500? And so, that's a combination of like, can you swap ads with friends to get in the back of their book, kind of thing. Obviously, you have social media now, and that's always an ever-evolving, ever-confusing landscape of marketing. To the point where I would even say, to this day, Marvel, DC, Image, even a lot of the movie studios have yet to figure out how to effectively market their product. And so here's Doug, little bitty Doug, in his office in Utah, trying to compete with those guys. And to be honest, I don't think any of us know what we're doing. So you just you got to experiment. You got to keep changing your tactics. You got to kind of consistently evolve, always, daily, and try to figure out what's working and what doesn't work. And it's tough.
But liberating at the same time when it clicks.
Oh yeah, you're real happy when something actually works. You're like, hey, I can't believe that worked. Let's do more of that.
It's formula, and it's like, all right, something happened.
Yeah, and the second you figure out a formula, Facebook changes their algorithm. So that's the difference in social media versus I think like advertising on TV or magazines, those kind of things, because those algorithms kind of stay consistent. At any point in time, Facebook can go, hey, 10,000 less viewers are going to see this than they did yesterday, just because we changed the algorithm.
Right.
and they don't tell you how it works. They're not going to tell you how it works. They're not going to tell you when it changes. So yeah, it's the marketing side of things is a beast.
It's interesting because when you present it that way, it could be somewhat discouraging to people and say like, well, screw this, But at the same time, could you imagine yourself doing anything different?
No, no. I love it. I love what I do. And it is discouraging from time to time. You pay for an ad and it doesn't get any traction, or you put out a new book and nobody seems to notice. It's a constant struggle, and yeah, it's discouraging. But unfortunately, that's part of the way being a freelance creative works now. You have to be more than just sitting at home writing books.
Right. Yeah, we, as you know, at the Shepherds, we're constantly talking about differentiating ourselves and stuff. But at the same time, you could have the greatest thing in the history of humanity, and if it's not seen, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. We were talking the other day, right, about like how I have a friend at Warner Brothers who said they roughly get about 1 million scripts a year to go through, and maybe one of them is good. How do you stand out in 1 million scripts? Think about the poor souls that are thumbing through those. Yeah.
I see like a giant text wall of scripts and just like line, and just like, oh my gosh, where is the gold?
Yeah. And we're guilty of it too, right? We've had talks where we're like, hey man, after page 10, I kind of shut off. I didn't see the rest. Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, imagine you're the poor guy that has to go through 1 million scripts a year.
Right.
Like, do you read the first 2 pages, 10 pages? Do you get even past that?
Right. It's interesting you say that because I worked briefly at Mariposa, Clint Eastwood's company.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me that Clint Eastwood reads the first 5 pages, the 5 pages in the middle, and the 5 pages at the end.
Huh.
And he said if he doesn't see the lead character in those pages, and if it's not clear what's happening in those 15 pages, 5, 5, and 5, he's not interested. And my point is like, yeah, there's 1 million scripts, but you don't even know how they're assessing them like you're talking about. So if we bring it back to you and your journey, how do you think you got yourself with the stamina to last this long to where now it's all paying off and, you're getting things optioned by Universal and, it's duly deserved. But what could you say? It was my blah, 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 or it was the such and such that made me last.
I'm hard-headed. Honestly, it's the passion behind it. I wish I could say, I'm mega talented, or I figured out a secret. The secret was I kept my head down and I kept writing, even when we were talking about, like, maybe this book didn't do well, or this advertising campaign that I came up with completely bombed. I didn't let that go, hey, you need to stop, you're not good at this. It was, I love writing stories. I'm going to continue writing stories. And then, honestly, like, I tell this to students a lot of times, too, like, build a library. Because if you have a library of books, that becomes an undeniable success. It doesn't matter whether they all sold 1 million copies. It doesn't matter whether people think you're Stephen King or not. If you've written 10 to 20 books in your library, people take notice. And I think that's a big help because then they think, oh, this person's serious. It isn't just, a one hit, they wrote this on a weekend kind of thing, on a vacation. This person loves writing. And I think studios and comic companies and and fans respond to that.
Yeah, you're showing the commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We can talk about Steven Spielberg. Not all of his movies have been hits. Not all of them are even good. But, man, you bring his name up, people perk up.
Go watch Duel.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And they already made that movie. It's called Christine.
Yeah.
A possessed truck, right? So you think it was the the head down, the committed mindset, the mentality of I'm going to keep doing it, and eventually it's just going to stick.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
100%.
That's not easy, man. I mean, where do you think you got that from?
Oh wow. I don't know. You know, I'm rebellious by nature, so maybe it's because people consistently told me I couldn't do it. They kind of drove some of that, like, I'm going to do this no matter what. And honestly, part of it is, you know, like I told you, like as a kid, I loved writing, you know, not knowing that it was writing back then. But I love telling stories. I do. I just love getting lost in these universes or these characters that I've created and telling these stories. And, you know, I love it so much, it's all I want to do every day. So it's almost like whether it was going to be successful or not, I was just going to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Do you think if we asked you, if Kenji and I asked you what your top favorite, say, 3 projects that taught you the most and gave you the most, what would they be?
Oh man, first will always be the original Star Wars. In those days, you know, I'm a little bit older. If you mentioned you even liked sci-fi in school, you got beat up. You weren't allowed to talk about it. And I was a huge sci-fi fan. So when Star Wars came out, and until that point, nothing had really like hit it. You know, everything was pretty bad. Star Wars came out and changed that for everybody, and to me, it was like this light at the end of the tunnel of going, hey, do what you love, follow what you love. It can all be done well to where people will become fans of it. I mean, look at Marvel Universe now as comics, right? Like comics 30 years ago, nobody cared about. You know, and now it's like you can't not walk in the mall or down the street and not see a Marvel T-shirt somewhere. The other one was probably Uncanny X-Men back when Chris Claremont was writing it, when there was just one book. That was huge. Again, a group of mutants who basically, even at a young age, I realized represented outcasts and minorities in our current society. Doing what was right, even though they were hated, was a huge influence on me. And then, and honestly, after that, probably Star Trek, the original series. Again, sci-fi wasn't supposed to be cool. I don't know if you guys are around towards the end of that, but at the end of that, like William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, the whole cast, they were all like Taylor Swift is now.
Oh,
you know, they couldn't go anywhere. Yeah, they were loved by everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so it just, you know, those kind of things like broke the mold and taught me that lesson of like, hey, you got to stand by what you believe in and keep chasing it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, you know, it draws me back to something you said earlier where you said, you know, we all don't know what we're doing. So you can't let the outside perspective tell you because they don't know what they're doing either. And it's just more of the stamina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And belief. You have to believe in it, you know, to where you'll do it for, you know, you see a lot of creators do something like create a miniseries and it does okay, but then they give up on it. You look at Star Trek and what they went through to get that done, which, by the way, was because of Lucille Ball, which a lot of people don't know about.
That's right.
Lucille Ball is what made Star Trek happen.
Yep.
George Lucas went through hell to get Star Wars made.
Yeah, they hated it. The studio didn't make it.
Oh, they hated it. They thought there was like no way this was going to work.
Yeah.
Walking Dead with Robert Kirkman, dude, that comic was coming out 15 years before Hollywood paid attention to it. Kirkman was working a job as a third shift manager at a warehouse to pay for it. Anyway, how many people have I don't even know what the word is for that. The fortitude, I guess, to like put out a comic for 15 years when it's just doing okay.
Yeah, define okay for people because they don't know. Okay, is that even breaking even?
Some months, no. Some months he was paying people out of his own pocket. And then, he'd go through swings of like, it would be, successful enough to where it was paying for itself and making him, let's guess at like 10, maybe 20 grand a month, down to where it was losing him $5,000 a month. And no matter what, he stood behind it.
Right. So a $25,000 swing because now he's in the negative.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. What do you think your journey has taught you the most about writing? I mean, obviously you've been writing for a long time, so it's a loaded question. But what has writing taught you the most over the journey?
I think for me, and it took until plastic came around for me to realize this, you have to write something that you would love, and if you don't love it, it's not good enough to put out. Mm. And I think there's a good thing. I know that sounds harsh, but to me, what comes out of that is like, yeah, you should be. If you're not writing something you love, why are you wasting your time? Like, write what you love. Write what you would want to see. Write what you want to read. Because if it's not good enough for you, why would it be good enough for anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you go about choosing the artists, right? Because as you said, you're the writer. You're basically the product manager. You're the project manager. You're the cheerleader. You're the spearheader. You're the marketer. I mean, how do you go and make sure you're putting the right people around you? Like, what's that process like?
It's an interesting process because a lot of it's going to come down to, are they available, how much they cost, those kind of things, and then are they the right fit? So a lot of times it's been more of a hunt and peck kind of thing where I've got, at any given point, I've got 20 bullets in that gun, as far as ideas are concerned. And then, you're kind of marching around looking for an artist, and then they're like, hey, let's work together. And most of the time I'll go, hey, here's 3 or 4 ideas. Which one of these do you think you'd like to do? And they are curated to kind of lean into their strengths. So like Daniel's great at dark comedy and horror. Doug Dabbs, who did Click, Click, Boom, he's great at action and female characters. So, you just kind of like bump around until you find the right fit. And honestly, that's, I say bump around because it is like a lot of it's just being prepared for the opportunity when it hits. And there's a lot of luck involved.
God, it's so interesting because in a business that, is obviously tethered to entertainment, you'd want some kind of repetitive, tether to a repetitive system, right? You want to go, well, I can follow this, but just listening to you can't follow anything because everything is unique into itself.
Oh, yeah. Totally agree with you on that. And that's a lesson I have, a hard lesson I've learned. Because honestly, it's not that different, except there's agents and stuff involved, than saying casting a TV show or a movie. We'd all start out with like, hey, we have this female lead. Let's start with Scarlett Johansson. When is she going to be? She's interested, but she won't be available for 4 years. Well, do we want to wait 4 years?
Yeah.
And it's just there's no like. It is, Brian Stelfreeze, he's always looking for an equation to solve everything. And unfortunately, in this case, I don't think there's an equation because there's too many variables to take into account.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of like, you have to be always open. Like every day, I'm looking for somebody who might fit a project every day. And if your mind's not in the right space, you can overlook somebody. And so you just have to be prepared for it at all times. And I think that's, just like, hey, there is no specific way to do this. So you better be ready at a moment's notice to take advantage of it when it pops up.
How long did it take you to learn that?
20 years.
Right. You're like, there's got to be a template.
Yeah. I like to equate things to dating in high school, and it's and I realized like at cons, I would go to cons, and I was so focused on talking to editors at cons that I would miss other opportunities. I had my blinders on, and I think it's that same thing that they do in every teenage rom-com movie, where like somebody's so focused on dating so-and-so that they don't realize that the perfect partner for them is right beside them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and honestly, that's how, I've kind of approached life now is like, hey, just make sure you don't have your blinders on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You and I are the same age. It reminds me of a movie called Some Kind of Wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
With Eric Stoltz and, all Jennifer, Jason Lee, and, that's the same message, right? Keep yourself open because the gold is right in front of you. But if you're focusing on what you think is gold, it may not be gold for you at that moment. It's different this time, right?
Right.
So yeah, being flexible and open. That's amazing that you learned that, because so many people don't learn that. Not even just writing, but in life. But
right.
What's something that you would tell someone? Because most writers go through the same things, right? They're going to have a lot of the same experiences. What's the one thing that you think is most detrimental to writers that you would say something to them right now and say, forget all that,
Forget all that. Man, we covered the kind of the permission one, like just start doing it is always the big one.
Yeah.
I think one of the, and this goes along with the permission thing. There are a lot of gatekeepers and a lot of gatekeeping rules that you'll read in books and online and, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And dude, those are all garbage. I don't know any two writers who have broken into comics or even into Hollywood the same way twice. And so when somebody's got a book and they're telling you, hey, here's how you make it, I immediately kind of discount. I'll listen to it and put it in the, in the mind for later. But like most of the time I go, oh, that's a rule you're making up. And, we've been working together to know this, like even the different projects we have, the paths they take are so different and unique that somebody to tell you, hey, this is the only way you can get a TV show made, we know that's not true.
Yeah, that's a great point.
You got to figure out what works best for you. Like Jefferson, you're good in a room. I hate being in a room. I'd rather just send you a written document. That's what I do. I write. So like I have to figure out what works best for me. And going, hey, listen, if I'm going to pitch something, I need to do a written document because that's where I think I excel. That's what leans into my strengths. Yeah, where I think you're like, hey, listen, I got an idea for a movie. I'm just going to go in this room and pitch it. And that works to your strengths.
Yeah. Yeah, so go towards your strengths.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've all got weaknesses, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's the beauty of the Shepherds, right? It's a slight tangent, but that we've all got our strengths and weaknesses, and we cover the gaps because of the group. And it's just a beautiful thing. But I want to touch on that I find fascinating, and I've spoke to you about this before, is you mentioned the cons, right? Going to these Comic Cons and having your titles there, and the super fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always find it interesting that in any other written form, unless you're mega, but even in novels or whatever, I just find it interesting that the fans in the comic and graphic novel world seem to feel like they know you and your buddies more so than in any other medium in entertainment.
Yeah, it's and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here. It's scary and very interesting at the same time because people will come up and be like, hey, Doug, I'm so-and-so. And you're like, I'm not sure I've ever met you. Oh, we haven't met, but I follow you online. So you get these fans who, like, read your books multiple times and may know your book better than you do at this point. Because you're like, hey, something I wrote 10 years ago, I haven't been reading it since. And they come up and they do. They know the book better than you do. And they know you better maybe than you do. And that's where things get scary. They're like, oh, yeah, when you did this and this thing, this is what you were thinking, right? And you're like, well, I'm not sure I remember, but that's kind of scary that think you know what I think, and if they're right, it's even scarier. But yeah, super fans are, like, dude, they're diehard, they're loyal. Some of them have ended up being some of my best friends. So I love that part of it. But like, what I love about the comic world and the super fans in the comic world is honestly like their loyalty and how they'll stand behind you and support you when you really need it is something you don't get anywhere else.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's beautiful because of that connection, and maybe, my take maybe is that they learn so much about you and your perspective and your voice in different ways, and then it's accompanied with such beautiful art, and then maybe a novel, right? It's just text.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that little part of you is coming through. This is my baby. I love this story. Like you said, I would buy this myself if I wasn't telling it. I'm the project manager. I'm the voice. I'm the marketer. They must be feeling that in some way, because it's such a deeper connection.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I can't ever thank those kind of fans enough, because, like I said, when you're down, and those days when you're like, man, I suck. I just need to give this up. They're the ones that and it never fails. They're the ones that'll reach out to you on social media and go, hey, you changed my life. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Out of the blue.
Yeah, out of the blue.
What, Kenji?
Your biggest cheerleaders, it's like always, no matter what.
Yeah, when you can't cheer yourself on. I mean, cheering yourself on is such a big component, right? I mean, if you don't think you're awesome, definitely people are going to have a hard time following you.
Oh, yeah.
It goes inside the same train of thought that we've had this entire conversation about, perseverance and just, believing, fighting for your creation and everything like that, fighting for yourself, and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. As we wrap up here, man, I mean, thank you for coming again, of course, and, we get the pleasure of working with you every day, and, we know where your desk is, so we get to harass you at free will. But, what's something that if you could go back and say, hey, Doug, I know you're 3 years old and you love telling stories and, you're going to go down this journey. What's the one thing that you would have told him that would have made the biggest impact?
I think for me, confidence is always an issue. And I think I'd say, hey, listen, you're a weird 3-year-old. Embrace that. Love it. Water it. Make it grow. Be as weird as you possibly can at all moments. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say.
Not at all.
I fought too long trying to be normal, and I think that held me back. Yeah. I tried too hard to fit in.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. I mean, imagine, I have this idea. It's a space opera. Okay, first of all, what the heck is a space opera, right?
Yeah.
And there's these guys running around in these white outfits called stormtroopers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna have the money for the CG yet, so I'm gonna cut in World War II footage.
Yeah.
So that you see that there's gonna be CGI spaceships fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And people scratch their heads, but it was weirdly attractive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Star Wars.
In a market at that time that nobody wanted sci-fi.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, imagine what, how much he had to get over his own doubt and his own lack of confidence, and, the studio saying, I don't want it, it's terrible. And, and then now it's the standard, right? It's the one everybody pulls from, So, I mean, that's beautiful, man. So tell everybody what you got coming up down the pipeline. I mean, obviously you talked about Click, Click, Boom. That's a universal thing, right? They picked up your IP.
Yep. So Click, Click, Boom got options, so we're pretty excited about that. Obviously we're doing a sequel/prequel to Plastic. So Plastic, Death, and Dolls comes out in June. And then I've got 3 other books that are coming out through Image over the next 8 months, but I'm not allowed to talk about them yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when you're at the level that you're at, and you're at that special. You get to say it's unannounced. I'll tell you when. When.
Yeah. It drives me crazy, but at the same time, I don't want to make my publisher mad at me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, brother. I mean, once again, we get to enjoy the honor of being around you all the time, and making us better. Just being who you are, man. Weird and cool and fun and smart and intelligent and supportive and argumentative and all of it, man. So yeah, look,
it's been a pleasure being on. Thanks for including me in this.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we'll see you guys. Thanks for listening in. Always great guests like Doug, and we're the Shepherds. We're out.